It was during 1962 Indo-China War when Indian military first came across the Kalashnikov pattern rifles. The typical squad leaders of a Chinese PLA section were armed with the Norinco Type 56 rifle, colloquially known as the AK-56 in India as well as Indian subcontinent. India did capture some of these. However, the Indian defense establishment back then really didn't think much of them. To them, they were at most a new kind of submachine gun, which was really not something worth looking for. However, there was one aspect for which the Kalashnikov proved vital. After the defeat in 1962 war, India created the Special Frontier Force, a paramilitary group consisting of exiled Tibetans. And during 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War or the Indo-Pakistan War, whatever you say, these SFF commandos were supposed to do covert ops behind enemy lines in Naga Hill Tract to make sure that these operations stay covert even after someone gets captured or not during war. The typical SFF commando were given uniforms which weren't of the same olive green pattern of the regular Indian army, as well as weapons which were not of the Indian lineage. Especially, they were given Bulgarian AK rifles. And this is how the first time uh, organization in India were issued an AK pattern rifle officially. However, it would take some time for the mainstream Indian military to fully understand the capabilities of the AK rifle. From the period of 1971 up until the Sri Lanka crisis, the Indian military mainly used the AK for its elite troops, the paratroopers, the special forces, and all those other units. However, Operation Pawan showed the brutal truth of modern day warfare to Indian Army. During their tenure in Sri Lanka, Indian forces were mainly armed with the 1A1 SLR rifle, which was a copy of the British L1A1 SLR rifle, which in turn was a semi auto only version of the venerable FN FAL rifle. However, Indians soon found out that in the dense jungles of Sri Lanka, these FAL or SLR rifles were not particularly suited. They were heavy, they were awkward, they were cumbersome. On the other hand, the enemy, the LTTE insurgents, would carry the AK series of rifles, many Type 56, but also many real Soviet AKMs and such. The AK was lighter. It had a round which was very much easier to control. It had adequate accuracy. It was compact. In all, in practical matter, it was better than the SLR in every way. So India started looking for adoption of the AK. So now we come to 1990s. 1990s was a very turbulent time period both for the world as well as for India. Its largest trade partner, the Soviet Union, fell down in the 90s. The Kashmir insurgency came to a boiling point. Huge stockpiles of insurgency uh, insurgents were found in Kashmir and other places. The Maoist movement was taking its swing, all while India was also planning to finally adopt the 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO round with the induction of the INSAS rifle. However, the peculiar urban conditions of Kashmir, as well as the dense vegetations of the Bastar belt, compelled Indians to look for AKs, even when the 5.56 INSAS was on the verge of being adopted. Although India did adopt the INSAS, the 7.62 by 39 millimeter firing AK remained in high demand even by the regular troops of many frontline units which found themselves doing coin ops in Kashmir or Bastar or any other area. So, with the fall of USSR, what India now had access to were a complete easy market of massive surplus storages. These from these storages, many 7.62 caliber AKs were brought. Among them were the East German, former East German FBI KMS 72, authentic Russian AKMs, as well as Romanian PMMD 90s. This is how, for the first time, many regular troops came in contact with the AK. Mainly, the newly formed Rashtriya Rifle um, paramilitary group, those found themselves to be favoring the AK, especially because of its reliability and the barrier penetration capabilities of its round. During Kargil War, there was a crescendo of the positive um, reputation that the AK holds in the heart of the Indian soldier. During Kargil War, the indigenous INSAS didn't perform as well as people expected it to be. There were issues, some major ones. Meanwhile, the AKs were performing flawlessly. This caused so much enthusiasm for the AK that it honestly turned into almost in a mythical status. We are talking about late 90s, and in many cases, the typical FUD lore surrounding any gun that exists today were also very much present during those days. Every generation has its own FUD lore time, and the usual things that are associated with AKs: remarkable reliability, uh, and so on other. Those got associated, and almost every soldier wanted one. In fact, the demand was so high that any captured AKs, even partially damaged ones from the terrorists, were put in back into circulation after their repairing them. That's why a lot of Indian soldiers can be seen during this period with Type 56 rifles, with Norinkos. Although India has never purchased any Norinkos from China ever. And what really caused the love for the AK, and especially reliability, you have to understand that India is not really known for producing quality ammo. In fact, I would say in many cases, Tula or Ulf is a gourmet level of ammo. The Indian ammunition has historically been very underpowered, accurate. It's surprisingly accurate, but very underpowered, and would often have issues with failure to feed or failure to eject in regular firearms. However, because the AKs, most of the AKs are purposefully built as this overgassed system, they would chug along using Indian made 7.62 by 39 ammo with no problem whatsoever. And that was a huge thing for an ordinary Indian soldier. So the AKs started getting beloved. In many cases, the failure of the INSAS and the increasing aftermarket support for the AKs only added fuel to the fire, especially during the global war on terror era. A lot of companies, especially in Russia with Zenitco and Israel with FAB Defense, would create a lot of modernization kits for the AKs. Now, AKs aren't the most modular weapon system in the world, but what people don't understand is that modern day, even the least modular modern day firearm is likely more modular than any other period in human history, any other gun in any other period in human history. So the AKs got modernized. Many AKs got modernized, and they proved to be very good. So the AKs got even more popular as time went on. However, by this time, India was really trying hard to make its own AKs, because importing so much guns are draining for the foreign reserve, as well as there's obviously the status of creating a competently made gun. And the incest really did not give the Indian defense establishment that prestige was not there. But hey, the AK is a fairly known system. Its internals and dimensions are very much open source. So obviously, India tried to make its own AKs. Now, honestly, if I go to the details of the Indian AKs, that would be a completely different video. So I'm not going to go into details on that in this particular video. But nonetheless, India has created its own AKs, mainly the OFB Ghatak series of rifles, as well as the Trichy assault rifles or TAR. The latter would, in my opinion, be the best Indian built rifle till date. However, these two rifles came into service much later, and there would be again a separate video about their history. But by this time, aside from the TAR or 3GAR and the OFV Ghatak, India basically jotted down two countries at its most supplier of AK pattern rifles. One was the Russia with its AK 103 and 203 platform to be supplied for the regular troops. The Indian Air Force saw a lot of promise in the 103 and bought some 70,000 of them. And obviously, the AK 203 was beloved so much that India decided to make that rifle to replace the aging INSAS by now. The another country that India took really interest in was Bulgaria, especially Arsenal. It's kind of ironic to think that it was Bulgaria whose AKs were the first AK pattern rifle to come to India, and now, even after almost 60 years, the relationship is still quite strong. India Indian paramilitary forces brought a lot of these Bulgarian arsenal ARs. Um, at first, AR M1, and then many brought the 541 series. But basically, Russia and Bulgaria are currently the two countries Indians really like to buy AKs from, and like to produce AKs with them, because the 3G AR or TAR is very much heavily inspired by the Arsenal AR itself. And so this is how AKs came to Indian military, and it seems that in future too, the relationship between AKs and Indian military would grow stronger and stronger. Yes, modern day India does not have the issue of producing terrible quality ammunition nearly as much as it once had, but still, considering that India's battlefield doctrine is to gain fire superiority, basically wall of steel, the scale production of creating modern tri-basic quality ammo would take place. So up and until then, the AKs and other similar overgas systems would be the best thing an Indian soldier can carry into battle, because you know the nothing beats a bang when you want to hear a bang. Have a nice day, everyone. This is Deep Pro signing off.